Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to the last episode of 2020 of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we have a couple topics that I think are both either fun or just interesting.
I agree.
And hopefully you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're actually recording this Tuesday morning rather than Tuesday morning, because a lot of times we're recording at like 2, 3 a.m., and it's like 9:54 a.m. right now, so we might have a little bit more energy than normal, or we might not, who knows? But I'm actually really excited about my topic. It just sort of popped in my brain last night. I'm going to be covering the events of Y2K. Robin, what are you going to be covering this week?
I'm going to be covering this person called La Voisin, so hopefully it'll be cool.
Awesome. I have no idea what you just said, so I'm excited to learn about it later on. But I think I'm going to go first, so I guess I will just dive right into it. So this, like Robin mentioned, is the final episode that will release before the new year, which means Robin will close out the show by saying, "See you next year." Almost certainly. And, technically.
Well, now I can't do it because you already said
now
it.
You have to do it because I already said you were gonna. Technically, the Storytime episode will be recorded live today on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. I will say Robin will probably sign that one out with "See You Next Year" also, so just tune in for that if you want to see it. It's a good time. So you can get one last dose of us before the end. And speaking of the end, I thought it would be fun to talk about something from the past that was supposed to be the scariest thing to ever happen in my lifetime. Most of the folks who listen probably remember this, but any listeners who are 21 years old right now, say your birthday is today, if you are 21 years old or younger, would not have been alive for this, which is just fucking baffling to me. I am talking, of course, about Y2K.
Even if you're 24, if you're 24, you have no idea because you're too young to know everything that happened. But maybe you remember like, oh man, my parents are freaking out or whatever. But
yeah, maybe. Who knows though? But the first thing I should do is explain for anyone who actually doesn't know or is not familiar with that term somehow. But Y2K stands for the year 2000. Because
isn't there a game called like NBA Y2K or something?
There's NBA 2K.
Oh,
it's not Y2K.
Okay.
So obviously we weren't great at nicknaming and abbreviating stuff back in the early, or I should say late 90s. Because this term started getting kicked around, I think in like 98, maybe early 99. But back in the day, people were legitimately worried about New Year's back in 1999. Which I still cannot believe was 21 years ago. It is really crazy to think about it that way. I was 14 years old when Y2K was happening, so I remember it pretty vividly. And what I remember, aside from some people being legit freaked out, is that the people who were not worried about this coming apocalypse were more in the mindset of, it's fucking New Year's for the millennium. We need to party our brains out. Because it's like the song says, you want to party like it's 1999. I mean, seriously, that's the thing. Like, it's the end of a 1,000-year cycle, and you get to be alive for it. Like, what is cooler than that?
I think it's funny because I came across a website last night that's called, like, Party Like It's 1660.
Yeah, I was like, how ironic. So, what we're going to do here is, before I get into some of the stuff from Y2K, I'm going to take a little trip down memory lane. And I'm not going to do it the normal way where I'm like, y'all remember 1999. I'm going to do it straight off of my memory. So in 1999, I was a freshman in high school and what folks would call a nerd. Also, I'd like to point out my brother graduated and he was a class of 2000. Like, fuck him. Like, why is everything always lined up for him? I mean, not much anymore, but
I graduated in 2007 and ours was like 007.
That's so lame. I hate you. Yeah. Like, class of 2000 was the one where it's just like, wow, just nailed it. But for me, 1999 didn't mean like this anticipation of Y2K and afraid the world's going to end. It did mean a bunch of other stuff though. Like the date immediately when someone says 99, I think 9/9/99. September 9th, 1999.
999.
Because that's the day the Dreamcast got released in the United States of America, and I fucking loved the Sega Dreamcast, one of my favorite consoles of all time. It also meant to me the first Super Smash Brothers would come out, which was awesome. 99 also means Pokemon Snap.
Yo, Pokemon Snap is probably one of the greatest games.
And they're making a new one, which is pretty awesome 21 years later.
I'm so excited.
Also, 99 was a year of disappointment because Star Wars Episode 1 came out and made me realize that some things just don't live up to the hype. And also the South Park movie, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, came out. And it gave me the most awkward moment of my life ever because I saw the movie in the theater with my parents. And at one point, Saddam Hussein whips his dick out in front of Satan. And I was just like, I'm sitting next to my mom. This could not be worse. 99, like I'm a huge nerd. So 99 means a lot of things. 99 was a year people tried to get these movies out or these games out that had these ideas of what the near future could be to kind of freak people out. So 99 also means The Matrix.
Okay. So 99, that's the first Star Wars movie I'd ever seen.
So you didn't start out well with the franchise then.
I remember that Star Wars movie. I remember getting like coloring books for that Star Wars movie. I just was all about that, princess, you know, or was she a princess? Princess.
I think she was a queen.
Queen?
Yeah. Queen Amidala. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So I was just all about that. Like, I was so into it. And now that I'm a lot older, I'm like, oh God, no.
What's kind of funny is there's certain things about 99 that I didn't realize until the older I got. Like, oh, that also came out in 1999. One of the movies being Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow came out in 1999. 99? Robin's watched that movie like 40 times in the last month or so.
Yeah. Oh,
also,
man, I love that
The Mummy.
Movie.
The Mummy with Brendan Fraser came out in 1999.
Is a good year.
It was a really good year.
Sleepy Hollow and The Mummy, all bangers. Got it.
Oh, bangers. Wow. Also, the found footage genre began in 1999 with, well, I kind of started. There had been movies before that, but got huge because of the Blair Witch Project, which came out in 1999. And one movie that actually talked about Y2K came out in 99, which was Office Space. Office Space is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I've probably seen that movie like 1,000 times at this point.
The main character in Office Space is a mood, for sure.
I hate that you're trying to use all these fucking contemporary parlances of the kids, but we do it. And that movie actually has a really good explanation of the base concern of what was going on for Y2K. So when programs were being developed in the mid to late 20th century, programmers to save space on their programs were only using 2 digits for dates. So like 98 instead of 1998. Now, because of this, when the date 2000 was going to hit, those dates would roll over and show 00, which means that in most cases, they would be represented as the year 1900 rather than the year 2000. And by the time 1999 rolled around, quite a few things used software that could be affected by the date being wrong. And when you think about it to start, you're just like, oh, that's not a big deal. But the first thing I remember hearing about with the Y2K bug is that it would affect bank accounts. I heard about it at school, and one of my teachers talked about it, and then all the kids were talking about it. And I say kids, I was 14 years old, I was a freshman, I was like, I'm a grown-ass man. And I was like, now I'm 35. I'm like, no, you weren't, you stupid little asshole.
Well, did they think that, like, interest and stuff would be retroactive and it would take away your money?
It didn't really have so much to do with interest. It had to do with dates of transactions. Because things are pending until it gets to the date where it's supposed to clear. So basically, if you had a bank account and anything that was done after the year 1900, which would likely be just about everything, would be erased. That's the theory that people had. And honestly, a lot of folks were afraid of this without understanding exactly what the effect would be. So the one thing I heard at school a lot was when the year 2000 hits, your bank account is going to go to 0. And all your history from your account will suddenly be set for the future, so your balances are going to disappear, and it's going to happen for everything around the world. Like every bank account, every financial system is going to get zeroed out. And I remember the first thing I thought when I heard that is, that's bullshit. Like there's no way that's going to happen. But then I went to a party at my cousin's house later that year, and I heard all the adults talking about it. And they were like really serious. A few of them were really freaked out about it. And I was sitting there like, oh shit, like this is the thing.
Did anyone start pulling their money out?
No, no one started pulling their money out, but there was a lot of talk about like how the world was going to end and society was going to collapse. And some of the grown-ups that were talking obviously were not experts, but hearing grown-ups talk about the end of the world like it's a real thing that's about to happen is really fucking crazy. Like I was 14 years old and here are these adults that I'm like, I've known my whole life that are in charge of so many different things and our parents, and they're the ones that you kind of look to for guidance, and they're saying the world's going to come to an end.
Didn't they think that, like, all the nuclear missiles or something were going to launch or something like that?
They thought nuclear, everything, every system attached to a computer was somehow going to be affected, and because of that, it could cause the end of the world, basically. I think what people were really afraid of, and during this conversation, what people talked about was that defense systems would basically be rendered useless when the date rolled over, and because of that, the entire country would be defenseless, so attacks were bound to happen, which means that the only way that we could respond was like the manual nuclear silos of people turning the keys simultaneously and shit like that. So there were people out there that got really fucking freaked out. And like the idea of a total economic collapse like occurring at the stroke of midnight was kind of terrifying, even to a 14-year-old that didn't even have a bank account. So I just kind of sat back and listened to what everyone had to say. So basically the discussions came down to the entire world's wealth is going to be set to zero. Everyone's going to be defenseless. The only things that are going to hold value after the year 2000 are the gold reserves, which no one has access to, and the possessions that have some sort of value in whatever post-apocalyptic world we live in. Most likely your bottle caps, right? And the more worried people talked about silver, which is this weird through line in my life. I've heard a lot of rants about people saying that the world was going to come to an end or society was going to collapse, and make sure you have silver, because silver is going to be the thing that'll save your life. And like that's happened 3 times in my life where someone was dead fucking serious about the world ending and all they wanted to talk about was silver. So after they talked about how the value of the world entirely would be set to zero, I remember them talking about all the defense systems and how everything was going to be taken down and offline. And the only thing I contributed to this conversation as a 14-year-old basically sitting there on a couch and somehow being surrounded by adults suddenly talking about this was bringing up one thing that seemed logical to me, which no one had accounted for, which was time zones. Like all I asked was like, won't other countries have this happen to them first, since they're in different time zones? And I kind of got brushed off. Like people were like, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. But at some point, someone brought it back up. And I remember it being spun into something from one of the conspiracy theorists about how that's how it had been planned. So that insert country here, I can't remember which one, whichever country they were most worried about taking over the US, would be able to deal with it first, figure out the solution, and be ready to invade or attack America when Y2K hit America, where we have, like 5 different fucking time zones.
Okay.
So obviously I was not dealing with experts when this was happening, but I do remember this being a palpable thing. Like, this is kind of fucking scary. Like, I'm not really that scared because I don't really have too much to lose. Like, I have a Nintendo 64 and a 27-inch TV, which was huge to me back in the day.
Oh, now we're just like, that's my monitor.
Back in the day, I used to double box back in the day. I had my 27-inch and I had my 19-inch off to the side, so I wasn't too worried. But after the conversation calmed down and went, everyone went their separate ways, I had a family member who was a programmer, and she said straight up to me, like, it is going to be a huge problem. Not like they think, but it will be a huge problem.
When it comes to time zones, you know that joke everyone always makes, like, oh, we're alive then, so we're good. And no one's ever said that to you? Like, oh, no. Hey, are we alive tomorrow or whatever?
I've always heard the joke where it's like, what are the lottery numbers? Like, which football teams are going to win?
Yeah, with the whole time zones thing, it's just so funny. But when it comes to computers and stuff like that in, Y2K, it would make sense where you're just like, hey, did everything work out? What's going on? Right.
And as a slightly technological savvy 14-year-old, I understood that this could be an issue. And I was like, can't they just set the fucking date on the computers to like January 1st, 2000 and keep testing stuff until they fix it? And she basically told me like, that's what they're doing, but that's why they know it's going to be a problem. So I was like, all right, I understand. I'm not going to worry too much about this. I'm not going to fret. I'm sure someone out there is going to get things fixed.
Did Reddit exist back then?
No, Reddit did not exist back then. Lots of things did not exist back then. So covering this from my perspective still, the closer that everything got to 1999, the more I heard about Y2K, or New Year's Eve 99, the more you heard about it. Some people legitimately thought it was going to be the end of the world. Like straight up, 100%. I wound up leaving out a cult from this episode where they all die. Because I'm like, I'm going to have to cover the cult. It's a completely separate topic. It's too much to go into right now. But it straight up was just like, they thought the world was going to end January 1st, 2000. Like, that was what they were convinced of. And they weren't alone. People were really, really scared. Like, there were multiple religious figures, some of them that are still leading churches today, that came out and said the end of the world was happening January 1st, 2000. Jesus Christ was returning January 1st, 2000. That God was going to pass his judgment on all mankind January 1st, 2000. And it's like, it's just a really arbitrary date, man. Like, it's 2000. It doesn't have like a lot of significance other than it looks good. And like others stated it was going to be just the beginning of the end. Like the apocalypse would begin on January 1st. The world wouldn't come to an end.
Wow.
So I remember staying up late playing video games on my tiny little crappy TV that I already mentioned. And on my 19-inch TV, like I would have a channel on and it would just be a movie. And once like 2 or 3 a.m. hit, like regular programming would go away and it would just be infomercials for bullshit, you know? And even during infomercials on occasion, you get commercials for even shittier shit. And I remember there was a commercial that used to come on that would advertise Y2K kits, like survival kits for your underground bunker so you can make it through the millennia.
I like those kits. They sell like survival kits at Costco.
Preparedness kits are one thing, but these ones were like, this is how you can survive the technological apocalypse.
Oh.
Some of them had books about programming and like meal rations and all these weird fucking things combined.
I want one of those flashlights that you charge by...
They had one of those in there?
Those things are so cool. Yeah, you like charge it by, what is it called when you turn something?
Kinetic energy?
Yeah, you just like wind it up, you know, you wind up your flashlight and that's how it works.
Right.
And those things are so cool and worth it. I mean, I understand that sometimes being a survival person who wants all these things is a little crazy, but if the power goes out, it doesn't matter if
I have nothing wrong with preparedness kits, and I have nothing wrong with having a bunker where if you need to actually shelter in place for a long time, that you have supplies. But these kits legitimately had a bunch of bizarre items tossed together, and if you took the value of them and added them together, they were selling them for like 2 or 3 times more than they were worth. Because it was like, here's everything together, and this will save your life.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about that, is that the kits also had like books, which was basically like Surviving the Apocalypse for Dummies. And they had CDs that would talk you through the end of the world in them. And some of the books had numbers for you to call when the apocalypse happened. So you could call their helpline. Exactly. Like, it wasn't police or emergency services. They had 900 numbers they had bought
900.
that you could call and get information during the apocalypse that were active, where they would help you prepare. So it's like they charge you per minute and it goes straight to your phone bill. So these fuckers were so convinced the apocalypse was not going to happen. They bought 900 numbers. That would mean it's dependent that the infrastructure for the telephone still worked and the billing system for your telephone service provider would still work. And they had these things in place so that they could start collecting money right away, and they could keep collecting money in the year 2000 once apparently the end of the world happened, but all the phones still fucking worked. And their bank accounts still worked. Like, they never ever actually bought into it. So even I'm 14, and I'm like, this is total horseshit. Like, these guys are full of it. And I know there's lots of 14-year-olds just asking if they could stay the night at a friend's house. And that's actually what I wound up doing on New Year's Eve. I was just like, I just want to go hang out with my friends. And my parents were like, fine, like, just not in our house, because they wanted to go to a New Year's Eve party. I wound up hanging out with my friend John for New Year's Eve 2000. And my buddy Lee was also there. Shout out to Lee. He won our fantasy football league this year. Fuck you, Lee. How do you not remember what you did on...
I was 10.
10 is an early year, but still, you should be able to remember what you did.
Nope.
You don't remember New Year's Eve 2000?
No. Okay, so let me think. 7 years. Graduated in 2007. 2000. Was I in middle school? You
were 10, so whatever.
Oh, I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
I honestly, you know what? Maybe I spent it at my aunt's house. Probably not. I have no recollection of what I did that New Year.
I remember we watched a bunch of movies because my friend John's parents actually went to a New Year's Eve party too. They trusted us alone in the house. We watched a bunch of movies. We played a bunch of video games. We watched the movie Orgasmo, I think, for the first time, which if you've never seen it, it's hilarious. It's by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the guys who created South Park.
Okay.
So it's hilarious. If you've never seen it, watch it. And then we made a home movie about the end of the world because it was, Y2K. So why not? It was a fun time, but year 2000 hit, we counted down like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the world didn't end. Power didn't go out. The infrastructure didn't collapse. Days went on. Christmas break ended. I had to go back to school. None of those computers even blew up. It was a huge fucking disappointment. So this is the thing though. A lot of things actually did happen. And this is where my trip down memory lane ends and the actual impact about Y2K around the world begins. Like I mentioned, there was a cult. I think almost 1,000 people in this cult wound up committing suicide.
That is crazy.
We'll get to that in a different episode, but the Cliff Notes version of it is 2000 hit. Nothing ended. Everything was fine. And the leaders were like, okay, I think it's like March something 2000 is the official end of the world, because they were wrong and they were losing members from their group, their church, they called it. And so they're like, all right, we got to make a bunch of batches of Kool-Aid because everyone needs to kill themselves now.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened. They had everyone that was left in the church come the next date that the apocalypse was supposed to happen. They're like, you don't want to see what the apocalypse is going to be like. You're going to want to kill yourself. And like almost 1,000 people did.
That's
so
crazy.
That was something I never realized actually happened during Y2K, but it absolutely did happen. And the first thing I should mention is that folks that said the software bug was going to be an issue were actually right. Worldwide, it's estimated that individuals and companies combined for 300 to 600 billion with a B dollars spent in preventative measures to ensure systems did not fail on the date of the rollover. Quite a few analysts nowadays state that the amount spent was a gross overspend, although it is very hard to determine where the overspend actually was because certain systems had a fix implemented that may or may not have been necessary, but you don't know because if nothing breaks, you can't say that you actually didn't need that unless you roll it back and test it all over again, you know? Some shit did go wrong though, and in the ways that folks were worried about, just on a smaller scale.
No one could remember to write 00 on their homework assignments and just kept writing 99.
That's totally not true. It was the only New Year's, the only New Year's where you didn't be like, fuck, I put 97 again, and you turned your 7 into an 8. Yeah, the hourglass 8s, which just looked stupid for like the first 3 months. And I was like, you were so happy, like 0, 0. So the things that went wrong, honestly, were smaller scale versions of what everyone was worried about. It's like a man in New York went to return a movie he had rented on January 2nd. And a movie back then was called a VHS.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He went back to his local VHS rental store.
Blockbuster.
He was returning the movie The General's Daughter, which stars John Travolta, which is a murder investigation. I've never seen it. It's, I don't know. I remember my parents watching it and being like, this is boring. So he took the movie back and the clerk was like, that's weird. It's showing that it's late. And the guy was like, I thought it was the right day, but what do I owe? And the clerk said, $91,250.
No.
Because the local VHS rental store system had not updated properly. And rather than moving to the year 1900, like it was anticipated with the bug, it actually moved to a year that was not real, but in the system, whatever numerical value it ticked over to showed everything as being 100 years past due. So this guy wasn't the first, this guy wasn't the only one, but he was the first to come in and be like, you owe us $92,000 for this late movie.
So shouldn't these companies though, it's like, it's that late already, you owe us $30 for how much the movie costs. Yeah. So wouldn't it be like, you have it for so long, you owe us how much the movie costs? Isn't that what the libraries do?
I mean, they typically charge you more than what the movie or the game costs. Like, I broke a game out of rage when I was like 8. And they charged us like $120 for it.
What?
Yeah, it was fucking nuts. That has nothing to do with this, though.
No, I'm just saying, like, why does their system charge that much? That's what
it accrues late fees. That's what it is.
But, that's what I'm saying. Like, the system should have in place, like,
you think there should be a maximum amount that you'll be charged, but that is not how any of these places have literally ever worked.
That's dumb.
Like, that's not how the library works either. You can rack up, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for renting, like a handful of books and keeping them for decades. Like, there's so many episodes of, like, 90s sitcoms about that.
Well, then my late bill is crazy.
Great. Good to know that's going to hunt us down later in life. So, luckily, this local VHS rental store was like, well, this sucks, but we're going to waive these fees because obviously no one's going to pay $92,000 for a late fee. And eventually they got their system fixed. A similar problem took place in Denmark, where a beautiful baby was born in that country. It was the first baby born in the entire country into the new millennium. And when entered into the system, the hospital employee noticed that the child was being registered as 100 years old. And a lot of these bugs didn't end up rewinding time, but instead accelerated it. They thought people would be showing as like negative ages and just not existing, period. But it was actually showing them because a lot of systems didn't have ways to represent negative values. So when it's negative 100, it just shows as 100.
Huh, okay.
So this baby gets put into the system, and they're like, that's really weird. The baby's apparently 100 years old. And so...
Benjamin Button.
That's not to say the bug, right? The bug didn't happen as believed. Like, multiple computer systems in Germany, including the system for the German opera company, had its system revert to 1900 like everyone had been afraid of. This was actually really troublesome in Germany because the ages were thrown off. And it wasn't just regular folks who were employees' ages, it was their dependents who were also thrown off, including their children. So for parents collecting benefits for kids, suddenly their kids showed differently in the system. Instead of being 10 years old if you were born in 1990, you were showing as negative 90. But again, no negative value in the system.
So they were 90.
They were 90 years old, which means that they're no longer getting the proper amount in their paycheck because their kids are disqualified from benefits.
Because they're no longer
dependents. And on top of that, there's subsidies that were coming through from Germany to parents that had, obviously parents have kids, to people that had kids. And all of a sudden they were disqualified from that as well because the employer was reporting to the government like, yeah, they don't have dependents. Their fucking baby's 90 years old. They've been milking this tit for way too long. And all of a sudden, like, their income is totally fucked. So people didn't realize the impact until they suddenly didn't have coverage or their paychecks were wrong. So this was an actual glitch that did happen that people were afraid of. And Germany had several glitches that were notorious, but one of the funniest ones was a man who made a transaction on December 30th, 1999, and he had his transaction post in the new year. For anyone who's ever done anything with banking, sometimes your transaction doesn't post right away. You need to wait a few days, especially if it's a weekend or a holiday. So the new year rolls around, his transaction posts, and it's very unclear to this point why this happened and why it was only isolated to this one guy. But the transaction date was reflected in the new year when it posted as having took place on December 30th, 1899.
Wow.
Again, 100 years of difference, but because of this, the bank system retroactively calculated and deposited interest for the account, and the man came in and checked his account on December 2nd and saw he had just over $6 million fucking dollars in his account.
Would you go and try to spend all that money?
I probably wouldn't because I know that it would come back to me and I'd have to pay it back. And I cannot confirm, based off of all the sites I found, that they actually took the money back. They did correct the error, is what it states, but the internet uses terms like probably and likely had to give the money back. But I think we should all hope for this dude that they just said it was like Monopoly rules, like bank error in your favor. Like, congrats, dog. Enjoy your $6 million.
Bank error in your favor. I love that game. Sorry.
I love Monopoly. And it wasn't all fun and games, though. Like, that one's fun. But immediately after the rollover, folks were like, it was all horseshit. Nothing happened. So many folks were saying, like, Y2K was a hoax. Like, nothing was ever going to happen in the first place. And the first thing that happened that made folks say, like, well, maybe this is actually causing issues and we're just not hearing about them right away, came from the U.S. Naval Observatory. Anyone who went to the U.S. Naval Observatory's website on January 1st, 2000 saw the date January 1st, 19,100.
Yeah.
Which makes it seem like the bug was attempted to be corrected and it took out the last 2-digit thing that was displaying.
Yeah.
But instead of going to 4 digits, it went to 3 and it added on the 2-digit prefix of 19.
Mm-hmm.
So if that happened on the website and it was coming off an automatic clock, then it's safe to say that there are other places within the government that were going to have issues too. So when you see something on an official government website, it's kind of scary. And immediately they came out and they said, like, this is a black eye on our department. We've already gotten this fixed. It's no big deal. But it wasn't just the U.S. that had shit like that happen. In fact, almost immediately after the year rolled over into the new millennia, a nuclear reactor in Japan sounded an alarm that all the employees had to run to safety. And I mean, like, seconds after. It was like, hey, reactor's gonna melt down.
Wow.
So people freaked out because to them it was like all their fears were coming true. And when the staff checked what was happening, they realized that the radiation monitoring system was showing dangerously high levels of radiation were being produced by the core. And luckily, when they checked all the other systems to corroborate this terrifying event, they noticed that everything else appeared normal. So it was the monitoring system that failed and had triggered the alarm in error. It wasn't an actual emergency, but they then had to run the plant with no radiation monitoring system until they could get it fixed, which is just as scary.
Oh my God.
At that time,
you can't see radiation.
A different nuclear facility had a critical alarm go off. This particular facility used seawater to cool its reactor, and this critical alarm went off, and this is also in Japan, 2 minutes after the time rolled over. And this one was just as terrifying. People were being told they needed to evacuate, and they ran through their protocols and were relieved to find out that this was also a false alarm, and the system that was malfunctioning was not the actual reactor or the cooling system. But the error that they got was stating that the seawater that was used to cool the reactor had risen to dangerously high temperatures and had done so in 2 minutes,
Whoa.
Which would signal a meltdown.
Yeah.
Like the temperature is so hot, everyone needs to get the fuck out. So it's like people are evacuating and someone's like, okay, I just got to check and make sure this is real. I might die waiting here. He's like, oh, okay, false alarm. Like if I got false alarm for a nuclear meltdown, I'd be like, fuck you. Like, I'm going home. Like, you guys made me work the late shift on New Year's Eve. Fuck everyone. And I would not come back.
All I can think of right now is Total Recall. Lawyers like, Quaid, start the reactor.
Quaid, start the reactor.
Or I'm reading a Final Fantasy VII book right now, and it's all about Mako Reactor.
That's funny, because I've always called it Mako, because my friend's band is called Mako Reactor. Like the shark, Mako Sharks.
Oh, yeah.
Guess I'm wrong. I don't know. So going back to the U.S., I want to point out that the U.S. government actually spent quite a bit of money to make sure they were ready for the Y2K transition. And I think they were the number one country when it came to money spent. And the biggest chunk of money spent within the United States wasn't private. It was the government spending money to make sure that nothing would go wrong. So when the year rolled over, everything seemed okay at first. And it wasn't until later that they revealed that 3 of the spy satellites in orbit stopped sending a proper feed as soon as the rollover happened. So
that would make sense.
How does that make sense?
I mean,
how are you determining, Y2K expert Robin Grace, that makes sense?
No, I'm just saying, like, it doesn't know what to send anymore because it doesn't know, like, don't they send it based on, like, certain time intervals, you know?
I mean, it's not like it stopped working. It was sending different things. So let me get to it before you tell me that this makes sense.
Okay.
So rather than sending a steady feed of the Earth, like a la Google Maps that we have now that everyone has access to, it just started sending back a random stream of indecipherable information.
It doesn't know what to send.
It completely changed. It's not like it's missing its date and not knowing what to send. It's sending something, and it's sending like garbled code.
Aliens.
And they're like, what the fuck is happening? So when I heard this, I immediately thought 2 things. One is the code wall of like green symbols from the Matrix. And the Matrix also came out in 1999. So I imagine the first technician to see this probably shit his pants. Like, oh my God, it's happening. And then the other thing that I thought of was Independence Day, because that turned out to be more than static. It wasn't just a garbled signal. Like, that was an actual pattern that was consuming itself, which turned out to be a countdown. Which, if you didn't know that, you probably should have watched the fucking movie. It came out in like 1996.
Never seen it.
If you haven't, I hate you so much. That is your failure as a human being to not watch Independence Day. Also, when Independence Day was being released, they had the nickname for it ID4. And from then on till now, ID4 means to me Independence Day. Because it came out July 3rd, Independence Day is July 4th, whatever. So I Googled, like, when did Independence Day come out? And I Googled, when did ID4 come out? And it brought up a fucking Volkswagen. And I was like, okay, Google, get your shit together. ID4 will always and forever be Independence Day. Don't ever show me a car like this again. But either way, they were freaked the fuck out. They had 3 spy satellites that were non-functioning.
Oh, they're spy satellites?
Yeah, did you miss that part?
I just thought they were just satellites that were going around. Why do we have spy satellites?
Why wouldn't we have spy satellites?
Sounds illegal and sketchy.
It's not illegal. They're up there, they're looking down on stuff. I mean, I'm sure they're illegal in so many ways.
They're called spy satellites.
So it actually took them 3 full days to figure out what was wrong and get it fixed, because they had 3 malfunctioning satellites that were like explicitly for spying on enemies of the United States.
So, the spy satellites, right? Time zones. Countries like Russia are ahead of us.
Okay.
So maybe they were able to hack into our shit that wasn't going to work at midnight, you know? Because they had...
I think those satellites were based off of the time zone that their technicians were operating out of. So they wouldn't base the time zone off of whatever it was floating over, because satellites orbit the planet and they're going through all the time zones all the time. So you would have it programmed to whichever station you were monitoring it from.
If they knew that there was an error in that system, don't you think they'd take advantage of it?
If they knew, yeah. If they could. Because at this point, they're just like, you imagine if they took advantage of it, they wouldn't want people to know they took advantage of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like when you watch Ocean's 11, like, yeah, they tapped into the feed so they can watch the security cameras at the same time as the security people. They don't cut the feed and then just take it over explicitly. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So anyways, it took 3 days to get these satellites back and operational.
Not spy people.
You're just asking the weirdest questions, like time zones.
I just woke up.
If you get a spy satellite wet, doesn't it multiply into other gremlins? Like, no, you're just mixing rule sets here.
Wouldn't that be cool, though?
I hate you so much sometimes. So yeah, they wound up realizing that the issue was not the programming that had been used that were using 2 digits. It was the fix they put in place to prevent an issue from happening when 2000 happened.
Okay.
At some point on the 3rd day, someone's like, you know what? Roll back that fucking update. And they rolled it back to like, everything works. And that's what the problem was. So the money that had been spent to make sure a problem wouldn't happen is what caused a problem to happen on Y2K.
Huh.
It's like that whole, a man often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
Yeah.
Proverb.
Yeah.
From Kung Fu Panda. I love that.
Is that from
movie.
Kung Fu Panda?
I mean, they say it in Kung Fu Panda. I'm sure it's from many other things, but yeah, Y2K had a lot of shit happen that was absolutely bizarre. It wasn't just like my little podunk reality. It affected the entire world. And what's really interesting, and these are a few pieces of postscript for Y2K that I found fascinating, all of the companies that sold the Y2K readiness kits were sued at one point or another because people were like, it was bullshit, it was a hoax, you sent me a bunch of shit I didn't need, like you sent me non-perishable goods and charged me like $10 for like a can of something I could have bought for 10 cents. And they're like, too fucking bad. Because everything was marked as non-refundable and advertised as non-refundable.
Gotta read the fine print.
So people were fucking pissed. And it's like, yeah, they took advantage of your fear, but you let them do it. And all totaled, it's estimated that these businesses raked in $16 million in profit just selling basic bitch products to people who were too afraid to think rationally or just buy them on their own. So that said, not everyone who tried to profit off of Y2K fared as well as the people selling the readiness kits. A man named Wade B. Cook wrote a book called Y2K Gold Rush, which talked about the eventual collapse of society and how people were all afraid about how there's not going to be any value in anything anymore. And he advised, obviously in a book called Gold Rush, he advised that the best way to survive the tumultuous time ahead was to buy gold. And shocker, I mean, the book's called Gold Rush. Who would have thought he would tell you to buy gold in this fucking book? This guy has sold 19 books, and he always talks about how to get rich quick.
19. Oh, he's written 19 different books.
Correct.
Titles. Okay. I was like, he only sold 19 books? Why does this matter?
So he has 19 different books that he has published about getting rich quick. So by the time October of 2000 hits, the company Wade owned had to settle with the Federal Trade Commission and 14 state attorneys general for lying about how much money the company made.
Wow.
Because he keeps claiming like, oh, we make so much money by following these simple rules, blah, 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 blah. He's full of shit, and he got sued for it. By 2002, the company had filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and multiple employees stated at the time they hadn't been paid in months, despite when they asked what's going on, being told everything's fine, it's going to be on your next paycheck.
Wow.
They got completely fucked by this dude. From 2005 to 2007, the company that was left, Wade and his wife, were all investigated for multiple crimes, most notably tax evasion. So these fucking people, dude, they got this guy that basically said, I don't have any money, after he went bankrupt. But in the meantime, this dude used the money he had to buy everything in sight, including the majority stake of a fucking oil rig. Like, that's how much money this dude has. He's like, I want to own an oil rig. But he's telling people, like, I don't have any money. I can't pay my employees. I can't pay back taxes. I can't pay anything. But he's just spending money. And he was such a fucking moron. He took the fact that he was majority shareholder on this oil rig and said, like, well, that means I'm entitled to name it. And he named the fucking thing after himself.
Why would you name an oil rig Wade?
I don't know, because you're a fucking idiot. Obviously. It's like everyone's investigating this dude for tax evasion.
Like Batman.
And he's like, I don't have any money. And they're like, are you sure? He's like, wait, that? Oh, no, I'm broke, no money. The sign? I don't see a sign. Oh, that sign with my name on it? Yeah, that's the oil rig. It has the same name as me. I'm actually named after the oil rig. The oil rig's my father. Like, how full of shit do you have to be, and how stupid do you have to be to think you're going to get away with it? So it turns out the real secret to getting rich quick is to lie your ass off and take advantage of scared people and sell bullshit for a huge price and then fuck over all your employees and then lie that you ever made money and never pay taxes. Like, that's the real get rich quick scheme that he was selling here. It's also called being a piece of human fucking garbage. And you'll be happy to know that by August of 2007, so it took 7 years for this to all go down, Wade was sentenced to 88 months or 7.3 years in a federal prison.
So specific.
For tax evasion. His wife got 18 months and they had to pay $3.75 million in back taxes.
Wow.
He is out and alive still, by the way. He's doing well. His YouTube channel where he tells you how to get rich has 542 subs. We have double that, which makes me happy. But yeah, Y2K was a crazy fucking thing to live through. If you aren't old enough to remember it, you suck because you're younger than me, but also suck it because no one gets to live through the rollover of a millennia again for another 1,000 years. And we did, just saying.
Unless we live till 3000.
I don't want to live forever.
I'm excited to maybe live to 2100.
That's a long time.
I know.
This is just another example of how something that is an issue will always be blown out of proportion. No matter how serious something is, people are always going to make it worse. If it's a serious issue, it's going to be the end of the world. And when you do that, there will always be people there to lie to you and try to sell you something that'll save you. So just be smart, but seriously, invest in silver. I keep hearing it's important. It's like the only thing that kills both werewolves and vampires, so it's gotta be fucking important. I'm just saying. So that, my spooky friends, is my personal history of Y2K.
Nice. It was fun.
Thank you. It was also long. I didn't expect it to be that long. So before I move into our next topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break, starting with me telling you about Manscaped. If you want to head over to manscaped.com, you can check out all the products that they have. We have been sent a few things to use. I actually have owned one of their trimmers for a very long time. It trims delicate, sensitive skin like ball sacks or vaginas or pets. We've also been told that it can trim pets, and they're like relatively okay with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great product. I've used it for a long time. It was really cool when they reached out. They also sent the Weed Whacker, which is a nose trimmer, which it does a good job because my nose is like intense. So it's really nice.
I'm surprised because usually I can see your nose hairs from here.
I know. It's great products. They support us. If you use code Scaryish at checkout, you get 20% off and free shipping. So, all right. So let's go ahead and move into the rest of the commercials.
And welcome to my half of the episode. For the last episode of 2020 for me, I thought I would cover something that's been picked up and covered a million times over, and that is witches, because everyone's already covered witches. But this time, I'm covering a particular one, Catherine Montespan, and this, she was also just known simply as La Voisin, and that means neighbor in French, apparently, so she's just the neighbor. So that's a pretty cool alias. I mean, it's pretty creepy. Makes you sound, I don't know, like a criminal.
Does it?
I don't know.
The neighbor to me sounds really friendly.
But when someone calls you the neighbor, you know? It's
For me,
just...
I picture a tall dude standing behind a fence giving me life advice, like from Home Improvement.
Well, then you just call them Bob or Wilson or whatever his name was.
His name was Wilson. Jeez.
Wilson!
Different movie. Equally as sad.
All right. So the thing about this is that she wasn't necessarily a witch, but she comes up time and time again on all these different pages about witches, famous witches. She wasn't necessarily one, but I guess because of the things she did, it made it seem like she was one.
Like math or think freely as a female in the wrong time era.
Yeah, she was tried for the crime of being a witch. Which I think is what it really comes down to. As she lived during the 1600s,
yep.
Trying a woman for the crime of witchcraft wasn't uncommon. It was just something that they did. And this particular one is claimed to have claimed herself over 1,000 victims. Not her personally, but we'll get into that. I mean, it could be her personally, but we'll see. Okay. So, when you think of witches, most of the time our minds go to the Salem witch trials because that's just the thing that's kind of shoved in our face all the time, right? But for this one, we're going to head over to France, a place that I'm actually pretty unfamiliar with. I don't know very much about it. Paris is there. Eiffel Tower.
Versailles.
Oh, is that in France too?
Pretty sure.
Oh, okay. I've covered that episode too. That's
you
funny.
have indeed. I learned it from that episode.
She was born in 1640. Her name was Catherine Deshay. And you remember 1640, right?
I hate you so much.
Turns out not much happened in 1640. I guess the Treaty of Ripon, or I don't know how to say that, but this treaty was signed that restored the peace between Scotland and Charles I of England, which I think is a big deal. And then a number of historically notable people were born and died, but really not a lot of other recorded historical instances. So sorry, no gas prices here, but it was a leap year.
Good to know. An extra day.
So she's born in 1640. Time goes on. She gets older. She becomes a teenager, marries a man named Antoine Montespan, and he was a jeweler and a silk merchant. He actually had a shop at Pont Marie in Paris, and that is a bridge that crosses La Seine, and La Seine, it's the river. The Seine River. But as with any life, there come bumps in the road. Not everything is peachy keen until you die. Her husband's business kept declining and then eventually failed, went bankrupt. So she decided that, she needed to start supporting her family of 6, which included her husband, her mother, and their kids. Her eldest was named Marguerite. She began practicing chiromancy and face reading. So, in essence, she was a fortune teller.
Gotcha. What's chiromancy?
So, chiromancy means she read people's futures through their palms. It's palm reading. They just call it chiromancy.
I can kind of do that.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Haven't I showed you the trick with the kids?
No.
Yeah, I've shown you a million times the
trick with the kids?
Yeah. I can tell you how many kids you're going to have from your palm.
How?
I mean, I'm not going to do it. No one can see right now.
Oh.
I'll show you after the show. I give free readings, and by that I mean I'm actually going to charge you $19.99.
What's funny is whenever my family all gets together.
Oh yeah, the M thing.
Everybody looks at hands. There's like a couple people. My mom does it. I think it's because my aunt can read them, but they always look at your hands and see how it goes. Yeah, I don't know how it works, but they're always just like, better watch out. I'm like, all right, my hands
better not cry.
Well, how else does the song go?
Better not pout, I'm telling you why. I figured we could just move on.
Okay.
We just passed Christmas.
Oh, all right. So, apparently, this act, like this ability, was considered like a quote-unquote pagan superstition. So, they did not like it. So, Catholic Church was like, that's a pagan superstition, you shouldn't be doing that. She said that her fortune-telling was just using skills that God gave her. And she kind of just practiced and built on those skills. And she'd been telling fortunes since she was 9.
Wow.
So she's been doing it for a really long time, only turning a profit from it after her husband's bankruptcy. So she's like, I have these skills, might as well use them. We need to make money. She seemed to have a talent for what's called cold reading. And that's when you read like a person's cues as she told their fortune to make them believe that things about them.
Like the crossing over guy, John Edwards. I think that was his name.
I've never heard of him.
There's an episode about South Park where they talk about all the different things he got caught doing as a con man. And they talk about cold reading in general and all the different generalizations you can make about people. And that's why he had a large audience. You've never seen Crossing Over?
No.
It was this dude he claims he talked to the dead. And he'd have a large audience gathered and he'd start saying like, okay, I'm getting a reading. Okay. It's someone's uncle. Someone's uncle named Stan, and he'd do shit like that until someone's like, my uncle named Stan. And, then he'd like take cues like, okay, what's their age? They're young. So obviously this uncle was probably a little bit older. And then he'd use generalizations like, he's saying something about the money. Does that make sense? And he'd take stuff that's like common concerns for every person. Like the most common thing people worry about is money, The next thing is family. So if they're like, no, nothing about money, it's like, maybe it's something about an argument or a dispute you had with someone else in the family. And then we're like, oh, me and my brother don't talk anymore. It's like, he's saying talk to your brother. And everyone's like, oh my God, he actually talked to my uncle. And this South Park episode breaks down the system of how you do cold reads and how you can convince people. And the entire episode is calling this dude the biggest douche in the universe. And they got sued over it.
Wow.
And the end of the episode, he gets abducted by aliens to be taken to an award show where he is awarded the biggest douche in the universe award.
Okay.
And it's just like, yeah, the cold reading thing is definitely ringing bells for me.
All right. So she was also a midwife.
Okay. So she has a lot of skills.
Yeah.
Midwives obviously being like medical people, which obviously a female practicing medicine in the 1600s would be looked at as witchcraft.
Yeah, I was going to say. So these fortune-telling practices eventually developed into more. She started making talismans and potions like aphrodisiacs, because why not? It supposedly even developed into arranging black masses and even selling poisons. Some of these creations were said to have contained stuff like the bones of toads, powdered teeth of moles, gross, iron filings, human blood, sometimes the dust of human remains, and even the Spanish fly. Like, Okay.
Spanish fly was boner juice before
Okay, so
Viagra was invented.
Spanish fly was something that they used, for sexy time assistance, but too much of it can turn poisonous. And I looked up the Spanish fly. I looked it up, and it creates this poisonous liquid, right, that causes festering blisters on contact with skin.
Wow.
So it causes festering blisters when in contact with skin. When it comes in contact with your eyes, it can cause blindness.
So it's like they give you Spanish fly, like, so this could fix your dick. But if you splash it on your eyes, you can't see. And if you splash it on your body, it's going to look like herpes.
1 gram of this can affect 5,000 people.
Oh my God. 1
gram of this poisonous liquid can affect 5,000 people. Symptoms include a painful erection. All right.
You're so hard it hurts.
It's a painful erection, bloody diarrhea, and other intestinal problems. Why? Why? I was just like, what the hell? I mean, they got the erection part right, but like a painful one? Come on.
All right, this will give you a boner. Side effects include shitting blood. So have fun with that.
God. All right. So, of course, any work with black magic is rumored to be alleged, There isn't really concrete proof that there was black magic being performed. So initially, she told her clients that their wishes would come true if it were the will of God. So then it escalates to her recommending that they take actions to make their dreams come true. So at first she's like, it's the will of God. If it's the will of God, then it'll work out. And then it goes, well, maybe you should do this to make it happen. You know what I mean? As her clientele grew, so did the list of wants and desires. These included things like wanting people to fall in love with them, hence the potions and powders, like aphrodisiac type stuff. She even had a network of people who provided poisons. Or then there's claiming an inheritance if someone died, or being able to marry someone else if their spouse died, hence the poisons. I'm sure it was a pretty lucrative business. If you have a group of people that are providing all these things, you got to be making money. You're just like a drug lord at that point, right?
I mean, she sounds like a very enterprising person. She's in the business of, poisoning people and getting inheritances given. So you got to get a cut of that if you're part of that.
Yeah. So in the late 1660s, she starts becoming pretty rich. She becomes rich. She becomes famous. And it's all because of everything that she does. And she was even in with like the high aristocracy of France. She was popular with duchesses and countesses. She was just like all up in everyone's business. I don't know. I mean, everybody must have wanted to poison someone.
Or they wanted like solutions to problems they had, and she could provide these ridiculous potions that could fix whatever they had wrong.
Yeah. She had clients coming and going all day, not in a dirty way. She was just a popular fortune teller. She even worked her magic at like Parisian upper class society parties. She was just she was the person people called when they had a problem, any problems. They were like, bring in the magic lady, bring in the witch. She spent a lot though. So she spent money to make money. She spent a lot of money on things to create the atmosphere that she thought that her clients would want. So she bought like super fancy, table covers and things like that. I don't know. She wanted it to be fancy because she had all these aristocrats and royalty coming to her with their problems. So
she wanted to look the part.
Yep. She was also known to have had at least 6 separate lovers. So,
So she's like, oh, you're having problems getting laid, huh? Let me take care of that for you.
They weren't small name people either.
I figured these are going to be like the higher ups.
They were like viscounts, alchemists, architects. They're pretty big name people. I don't know what happened to her relationship with her husband at all. I didn't see any of that. I don't know if they got divorced or if he died. I have no clue.
Or if he was just still around.
Or yeah, maybe. There was even a magician named Adam Lesage, and he assisted her and participated in her magic services. Lesage actually tried to convince her to kill her husband, and it actually worked, until she changed her mind. Like, she decided she had a change of heart and she wasn't going to go through with killing her husband. So I don't know how long he lasted after that. Okay. I like to think that her choice in lovers had to do with her love of science and alchemy. Not always to her benefit, of course, because she did make some bad investment decisions, but I don't think that, her having been taken advantage by a couple con artists kind of stopped her from continuing to invest and continuing to find new things when it came to science and medicine, things like that, you know? But yeah, she loved to invest in what she enjoyed, and I respect that completely. You like what you like, and
what she enjoyed was providing poisons to people.
Okay,
that's part of it, obviously.
All right. So, living a life among high society, constantly having to entertain, may have taken a toll on her psyche as she fell into alcoholism and started to get into more and more conflicts with others. Something that she did that was illegal at the time were abortions, and it was a service she provided as a midwife, and clients did include those in the aristocracy. She kind of became the head honcho of a network of providers. And like I was saying, she's like this big drug lord now. She's just like, oh, you need this done? Hold on, let me send you to so-and-so.
She has these list of services that are either taboo or forbidden.
Yeah.
That people are like, we just need to bring her in. Like, she'll take care of it for us. She's the fixer for this problem.
Yep. So she would refer these clients to other people, and then she would take majority of the profit as her fee. So she was just baller. One of these people was Marie Bose, and this was a rival fortune teller / poisoner / witch who was rumored, who kind of started rumors about her. And she rumored that there were bodies burned in the furnace at La Voisin's house, and that there were bodies buried in her garden. She's just like, yo, this chick cray. There's a lot of things that are sketch about her. Supposedly, Louis XIV gave the order that this portion of her business was not to be investigated, therefore leaving it the most unknown of her businesses. It also left her claims unconfirmed, so there's no way for them to really know if it's true or not, because they were like, stop investigating, it's done. So she probably got a pass because of her relation to his mistress, which we'll get into in a tiny bit. All right, so La Voisin's power of divination, on the other hand, was totally questioned by the congregation of the mission at the St. Vincent de Paul's order. And so this priest was just like, we don't agree with what you're doing. It's wrong. It's magic, whatever. So she was called in for questioning. She successfully defended herself in front of the professors at the Sorbonne Theological College. And this college was known for challenging heretical views, like Protestant views and things like that, things that were against their beliefs. But she successfully defended herself, and it just allowed her to keep going on with her business. There were obviously people that were like, there's something wrong here, but she was just like, no, let me tell you the science behind it and what I do, you know? All right. So one of her most notable clients was Madame de Montespan. Probably said that wrong. And she was the official royal mistress of King Louis XIV of France. And so, like I was saying, the reason why she got a pass with that stuff was probably because of her connection to this mistress. And the king was like, well, you can't tell people about any of this stuff. All right. So it's alleged that she had hired La Voisin to perform a black mass in 1667. And a black mass is like one of those ceremonies where they pray to Satan, you know?
Are you sure that's what a black mass is, or is that just what the interpretation of a black mass from?
During this.
Okay.
During this particular thing, everything that I looked at, they were like, they needed some darker magic here to make the things that they wanted to happen. So they would sacrifice animals and they would do other horrible things that I didn't want to put in there. Anyway, one of the officiants was Adam Lesage, that guy that tried to convince her to poison her husband, right? The goal was for this mistress to win the love of the king. And that same year that this alleged black mass happened, she became the official mistress of the king. Anytime there was a problem in their relationship, La Voisin would be hired to do more magic. In 1673, when Montespan and the king's relationship started to decline, there were a series of black masses that were performed. And these black masses were described to just be an altar made of a mattress on a bunch of chairs with stools on the side to hold the candles.
So yeah, definitely 100% official black mass.
Along with these, Montespan was given an aphrodisiac to drug the king with. Probably included Spanish fly. Probably gave him painful erections. In 1977, things escalated between her and the king, and she threatened that if he abandoned her, she would have him killed.
Wow.
So she's just like, you don't want to be with me? I'll fucking murder you.
It's a pretty ballsy thing to threaten a king with.
Of course, he would then go on to have a relationship with another woman in 1679. So, Montespan calls the magic team to kill both the king and his new lover. And though La Voisin hesitated at first, she eventually agrees. So she's
going to get into regicide now. She's killing kings.
So she devises a plan to poison them. And on March 5th, 1679, she visits the royal court in Saint Germain to deliver a poisoned petition. So she has this plan to hand over this poisoned petition, and when the king takes it, he's going to get poisoned when he opens it or whatever. That day, there are too many petitioners, and the king doesn't take their petitions. So she goes back home, hands it to her daughter, Marguerite, and tells her, hey, you need to burn this. So she does. She gets rid of it. And she plans to return the next day for another attempt at murder. And you're probably wondering, well, whatever happened to this woman from the 1600s I've never heard of before? And, well, good friends, there were a series of poisonings going around. People were dying. People were getting poisoned. With a lot of poisoning, happening, it got sketchy. People were like, what the fuck is going on?
So did she go back the next day to poison the king?
We'll get there.
Okay.
So, riots started breaking out. People started accusing people of witchcraft and abducting children to use in their black masses. Priests started reporting more and more people confessing to poisoning others. In 1677, a fortune teller by the name of Magdalene de la Grange was arrested for poisoning, but claimed she had information on crimes of great importance, because of course she does. Then there were more arrests, that of Marie Bosse, the one who had spread rumor about La Voisin in the first place, and then this woman named Marie Vigero. And they kind of got themselves caught in 1678 because Vigero was holding a party that this other chick attended. And she got drunk, and while drunk, this Marie Bosse, she started bragging about how she got rich. She was just telling people how she got rich selling deadly poisons to members of the aristocracy, and how she would be able to retire soon because she was just baller.
Wow.
Like, I'm sorry, but so much for that. Because she was arrested, and she and her daughter and 2 sons, they were all apprehended. This is even more sad considering that her eldest son was a soldier in the royal guard.
Ooh, that sucks.
Yeah. So he had nothing to do with it, It's just, that's what's going to happen. All these arrests tipped off police to the fact that there was a network of fortune tellers in Paris that distributed poison. So on March 12th, 1679, just a week after the first attempt on the king's life, La Voisin was arrested after attending mass. April that year, a commission gathered to prosecute all these offenders, and apparently there are some records of these proceedings that are preserved in the notes of one of the court reporters that were there at the time.
Nice. Shout out to court reporters.
Yeah,
good
shout
job.
out to court reporters.
Killing it for the last 500 years.
After her arrest, one of her maids, Margot, stated that the arrest would mean the end of a number of people from all levels of society. She was like, y'all playing with fire. this is a bad idea. So they questioned La Voisin on the issue. It suggested that although there was a formal order that allowed for the use of torture when interrogating individuals, it was never used, for the sole reason that there were just way too many big-name peeps that would be incriminated by her responses. Instead of torture, because she was an alcoholic, they kind of just kept her drunk the whole time.
Wow.
At first, she claimed all the poisoning was the job of Marie Bos. She and all her children were executed by burning May 8th, 1679. Vigero had died during her interrogation. So those two initial women that were apprehended were dead by this point. They're gone. Eventually, though, La Voisin names more people, admitting to selling poison herself, and names some of the clients that included several members of the royal court. And so they were like minor nobles. They got minor sentences.
How did they get minor sentences? And that other chick had her entire family burned alive.
Because they're royal.
That's
what are you going to do?
Shit.
So on December 27th, 1679, King Louis XIV orders that the whole network be exterminated, sparing no one regardless of rank. Eventually, the entire network of individuals, including La Voisin's daughter, is arrested. She denies ever meeting with Montespan, the mistress of the king.
Right.
And admitted, quote, Paris is full of this kind of thing, and there's an infinite number of people engaged in this evil trade, end quote. And she didn't speak of any black masses. So I don't know how much of that is conjecture, people making stuff up.
Or rumor over the last 400 years to slander her character, possibly.
It wasn't until after her death that the relationship between her and Montespan came to light, as well as the conspiracy to poison the king. It was confessed by her daughter, by Marguerite, and the testimonies of the other participants in her little magic circle. And the claims of her having burned the bones of infants in her oven were denied, of course, as well as the claim that there were bodies in her garden because her garden was too small.
That's funny. I figured she just had really nice flowers in her garden or whatever she was growing. So someone's like, she must have fertilizer that's like dead bodies under there, and then it just took on a life of its own.
Well, you never know. She also denied the use of syringes with poisons in the process of abortions. On February 17th, 1680, she's put on an official trial and was convicted of witchcraft and to the execution of burning only 2 days later.
Wow.
So it's sad. I mean,
it seems more political than they actually thought she was a witch.
Yeah.
It was like, you have way too much influence and you know all these secrets.
Yes.
So we're going to get rid of you. And so no one questions it. We're going to call you a witch rather than like the Salem witch trials where it was basically like, hey, this person said something I didn't like and it's a female, burn her at the stake.
I think it's, one part is that she's so smart. She's so smart and she's so accomplished, and they're just like, there's no way. There's magic involved. There's something, you are not what we expect of a woman in the 1660s or 1600s or whatever. You know what I mean? She's like her own business person. She does whatever she wants. She was probably way more successful than her husband. His business went out.
And I'm sure class played into it, because you have all these people who are like part of the royal court who are coming from like the upper class.
She's like lower class.
She's lower class, but she holds the keys to the kingdom, and they're like, we can't let this go on any longer.
So I can totally see why they were like, witch.
Right.
It was after this that she was finally tortured, allegedly. Official documents stated that this was so much so to the point that she begged for mercy. That being said, other persons claimed that there was no actual torture committed. Madame de Savigny, a French aristocrat, saw La Voisin before she was executed and reported that she was so healthy that it didn't even seem possible that she could have been subjected to any torture. So I don't know why there are documents that say otherwise. It's just, who knows? I don't know. History. It's 400 years ago. People did not actually write everything down back then either. There's so much stuff.
I mean, there's certain things they didn't want written down. And then anyone could just write something down and it could be bullshit. It's like if your crazy uncle's Facebook feed was somehow found like 100 years from now. And they're like, look at this historical document I found.
All right. So she was executed, burned alive in Paris on February 22nd, 1680. She, of course, did not go quietly. She like pushed a priest over. While she was getting burned, she was like kicking the bales of hay away from her to hopefully not get burned. She was just like not having it. July of that year, when Marguerite, her eldest daughter, brought up the connection to Montespan, that's when the king closed any investigation. He sealed testimonies and imprisoned the remaining accused under official royal decrees, allowing for their imprisonment indefinitely without trial. Because he was like, nope, we can't have any of this coming out. Fuck that. Some lived under house arrest, while others simply disappeared from history. Then there are those that took their lives instead of living in an indefinite imprisonment. They're just like, nope, fuck this, I'm out. So they killed themselves. And the thing with the king and Montespan is that he was like, I don't want to be with you anymore. So those that weren't imprisoned or severely punished still saw a downturn in luck. Montespan fell out of favor with the king and eventually retired to a convent.
She went to go be a nun at the end of her life? Or did she just stay at the convent?
I don't know.
When I hear retired to convent, I think they took the...
I don't think she became a nun. But they wouldn't let you stay there unless you were, right?
I don't know, actually.
I should have looked into that. I'm not sure. But that's where she retired. Even though he didn't want to, like, necessarily be with her anymore, he still had to, like, visit her while they were still together in the castle type thing, to keep up appearances. So
having to keep up appearances with your official mistress is just some level of class warfare shit I'll never understand.
He was a little hoe bag too. So King Louis XIV had so many mistresses. It's crazy. All right, so
like, who are you keeping up appearance? Do you think your wife is like, you better treat your mistress
nicer? The fact that they have an official mistress?
Yeah.
What?
Did she have a badge like the fucking Hand of the King from Game of Thrones? Like, I don't understand any of this shit.
No, she has like a gold chastity belt on.
I don't think it would be a chastity belt if you're a mistress. Just
Only
saying.
The king has a key.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know.
Now I want to watch Princess Bride.
Now
okay.
I want to watch Robin Hood Men in Tights.
All right, so several other nobles were forced to flee the country. Eugene Mancini, the son of one of these nobles, emigrated to Austria and actually became one of the greatest generals of the 17th century.
Wow.
He's credited with preventing King Louis XIV from taking over the entirety of Europe.
Wow.
So he was just like, "I fuck you, motherfucker." But yeah, that's the story of La Voisin. I just thought it was really interesting. This isn't so much scary as it was like a history.
It's like true crime history lesson.
It's witchstery.
It's so crazy too, because when you do true crime history stuff, it always comes down to like, well, if there was a female involved, they eventually got called a witch, and in a lot of cases, like, burned alive. And it's just the idea that people would think, well, we don't do that anymore. Yeah, we don't burn them alive, but how often are people just thrown under the bus for something they didn't do because they say something to the wrong person, and no one really pays attention anymore because they're like, yeah, it's not the Salem witch trials. It's like, yeah, but like, how much do you treat people with respect? Like, it hasn't completely been erased. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like this still persists. It's just spoken of in different languages. I really wonder, like, how things will read in 400 years when they look back on, like, I don't know, some crazy true crime wave that happened in like the 1970s or something like that, versus us checking out the 1600s, because this to me is completely foreign and bizarre. Like, how could people act like this? So I don't know. I thought it was fascinating.
I can't believe that people went to confession booths and were telling priests like, no, dog, yeah, I totally poisoned some people.
I mean, it's a confession booth. You got to confess your sins so you can get into heaven, right?
How can priests just be like, they killed someone,
and then they tell you like, this is your penalty to make up for it, which is, I don't know, probably why people kept doing stuff like that. Is because, like, commit sin, confess sin, complete whatever you're supposed to do to make things better, repeat. And I think that's how it was, especially in the case of like these people in the royal court who just clearly did not care about morality or being good people at all. They're just awful human beings.
People are shitty. I don't know. But yeah, that's the episode. That's the last episode of 2020.
I enjoyed it. I hope you folks enjoyed it as well. It was very interesting, very entertaining. So
the last episode of 2020, we did a lot of history.
Indeed. I mean, I only looked back 20 years, so you end up looking back a few more years than that, but it was still super interesting. So good stuff, Robin. So before we go, just a quick reminder, we do record our Storytime episodes every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you've never seen one or listened to one, we are actually reading the mail that we get from the wonderful Spooky Friends community that lets us know about things that have happened to them that's either supernatural, paranormal, spiritual, sometimes true crime, sometimes extraterrestrial in nature. And they say, hey, this happened to me. If you want to share this on the show, you can.
We want your homegrown horrors.
We do indeed want those homegrown horrors. So if you have a story you would like to share with us, please email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. You can also hit us up on any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scaryish podcast. Twitter is @scaryish_pod, and Instagram is @scaryish_podcast. We hope to hear from you so we can share those stories because they are so awesome. Thank you so much to everyone who sends those in. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish_podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1, and at $1, not only do you get ad-free episodes, but you get access to Patreon exclusive merch, like our little cryptid keychains that we have going on. And we also have one-time donations too. If you're not into the whole monthly subscription thing, you can go to coffee, ko-fi.com/Scaryish podcast. And all your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup, kind of keep us going, give us more time to make more stuff. And if you've been with us since the beginning, you've heard. The quality of our audio is so different. The quality of our video when we stream our live streams is so different, and we really couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. We sincerely appreciate you. And have a fun and safe New Year's Eve.
See you next year.
Whether you're going out or staying home, either way, have fun, stay safe. And I think that's just about everything we have. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you next year.